Chosen one, the pain you have been carrying is finally losing its power over you. You were never meant to stay inside that heavy place forever. What has been hurting you is already changing, and the reason is closer than you think. There is a moment written into your path when suffering stops being your language, and you are standing in it now. Not because life got softer all at once, but because the hold of that wound is breaking in a way only the universe could arrange. You have felt it, haven't you, that strange shift where the old ache no longer sounds as strong as it used to. That is not imagination. That is timing. That is alignment. That is something sacred reaching its end. You were taught to believe the pain would keep speaking forever, like it had become part of your identity, like it was the shadow attached to your name. But chosen one, what if the suffering was never your home? What if it was only the season that proved how much you could survive before your blessing arrived? What if every silent night, every tearing moment, every private breakdown was building the final line that pain was always meant to cross? Because this is what nobody told you. The pain had an expiration date. It may have felt endless while you were inside it, but heaven never marked it as permanent. Something was always moving behind what you could see. Something was always rearranging the ground beneath your feet while you thought you were standing still. And that is why the heaviness started feeling different. Not lighter yet, not fully gone, but different. Less like a prison and more like a door that has almost finished unlocking. You may not have been able to explain it to anyone, but your spirit already knew. It knew the breaking point was near. It knew the story was bending. It knew the universe was not punishing you, it was pulling you out. Chosen one, there is a reason the pain had to reveal itself so clearly before it could leave. Some things do not disappear quietly. Some things must be seen for what they are before they can be released. That is why the last stretch felt so intense, so personal, so impossible to ignore. It was the final resistance before the release, the last shake before the silence. And yes, the silence mattered. The silence was never empty. It was preparation. It was the unseen hand making room for the part of your life that could not enter while this wound was still speaking over you. You thought you were being overlooked, but you were being protected from bringing old pain into a new chapter. You thought the delay meant denial, but the delay was the mercy. The delay was the universe refusing to let what broke you come with you any farther. That is why this feels so emotional, because when pain ends after staying too long, it does not just leave a gap, it leaves an echo. And you are hearing that echo right now. You are standing in the aftershock of a sentence that was just closed. A chapter that used to control your breath is beginning to lose its authority. And here is the truth hidden inside that title, Chosen One. The moment you said, finally, something in your field shifted. That word was not just relief. It was recognition. It was your spirit understanding that the battle had reached the part where suffering can no longer follow you unchanged. The pain did not vanish because you became stronger overnight. It is breaking because you have become impossible to keep trapped forever. That is the part they never understood about you. You were never built to be crushed by the very thing that tested you. You were built to outgrow it. You were built to reach the point where the same pain that once ruled you would no longer fit inside your life. And once that happens, it starts losing its grip, piece by piece, moment by moment, until it can no longer speak with the same voice. You can feel it. That pain is not holding you the same way anymore. Comment, it's finally over, if you know deep down you will never face that pain again. Stay with this. And if this moment feels real to you, subscribe to Born into Light. Listen closely now. What you have been feeling is not the return of pain, it is the departure of it. Sometimes release feels strange before it feels peaceful. Sometimes healing does not arrive like a song. Sometimes it arrives like a quiet collapse of everything that used to hurt you. A cracking sound in the unseen. A door opening where there was only pressure before. That is why this moment matters, because it is not only about what ended, it is about what no longer gets to follow you. The thing that once made you fold is being stripped of its place in your life. The thing that once made you question everything is losing its right to define your path. The thing that made you cry in private is now standing at the edge of your story with no power to stay. And yes, chosen one, I need you to feel this part. The pain was never random. It arrived with a purpose, but it was never meant to remain. It came to expose strength you could not have discovered in comfort. It came to reveal which parts of your life were never aligned. It came to sharpen your discernment, to deepen your spirit, to prepare you for the kind of peace that only makes sense after survival. That is why the ending of this pain feels so personal, because you did not just endure it, you transformed inside of it. And now the universe is answering that transformation with a closure that feels almost holy. There is a strange thing that happens when a long pain begins to leave. You start remembering who you were before it consumed so much of your attention. You start noticing your own breath again, your own thoughts, your own light. The parts of you that did not die in the waiting, the parts of you that were preserved for this exact turning point. That is the hidden gift inside the breakdown. What felt like loss was also removal. What felt like abandonment was also redirection. What felt like silence was also a shield. And now the shield is lowering because the danger is no longer the same. The lesson has been written. The wound is reaching its finish. The pain is being escorted out of the place it once occupied in you. Chosen one, you are not standing at the beginning of another hurt. You are standing at the border of relief. And I know it may not look complete yet. I know there are still traces of what happened. I know some memories still ache when they rise. But do not mistake the trace for the throne. What remains is not what rules you. What remains is only what has not fully understood that it has already lost. This is the part where the old force tries one last time to remind you of its name. But its name is fading, its voice is weakening, its reach is shortening. And every time you choose not to return to what broke you, the ending becomes more real. Every time you stop feeding the wound with fear, the wound loses another layer of power. Every time you breathe through the memory instead of bowing to it, you step deeper into the space that was always meant for you. And something in your life is beginning to respond. You may not see it fully yet, but the shift is already underway. The pain leaving does not just empty a space, it creates a doorway, and when one door closes in divine timing, another cannot help but begin opening in the quiet behind it. That is why this feels so sacred, because what is ending is not just suffering, it is an old permission, a permission for the pain to stay, a permission for the wound to narrate your life, a permission for the past to keep signing its name over your future. Not anymore. That is the line the spirit of this moment is drawing. Not anymore. Not in this chapter. Not in this season. Not in the life that is rising around you right now. The ending you are sensing is real, and it is arriving with more purpose than you can see from where you stand. So when the ache gets quiet, do not panic. When the heaviness loosens, do not rush to fill the space with old fears. When your chest starts to feel less crowded by what once hurt you, recognize what is happening. You are being released. You are being separated from what no longer belongs in the same timeline as your growth. You are being guided out of a pain that stayed one season too long, only so you could understand how powerful your leaving would be. This is why it had to hurt so deeply. This is why it had to feel so final. This is why the word finally carries so much energy here, because it marks the point where the suffering stops being your future and becomes only part of your testimony. And even that testimony is changing now. It is no longer just about what broke you, it is about what could not keep you. Chosen one, the ending is not loud, it is holy, it is quiet enough to miss if you are expecting thunder, but if you pay attention, you will feel it in the places where fear used to sit. You will feel it in the pauses where pain used to answer first. You will feel it in the strange calm beginning to rise where your tears used to fall. And still, this is not the full reveal. It is only the sign that the worst of that pain has already started to lose its place in your life. Something deeper is unfolding now, something that was written before the hurt ever found you. The relief is real. The release is real. The turning point is already in motion, so stay with this. Stay open, stay awake, because when a pain finally ends after it has tried to stay forever, the life that follows does not arrive politely. It arrives like destiny remembering your name. And when it does not ask for permission. It simply steps back into the space that pain once occupied and makes that space feel different, quieter, clearer, almost sacred. That is what you are moving into now, not a louder life, a truer one, a life where your spirit no longer has to brace itself before every next breath. A life where the weight that used to greet you first is no longer allowed to define the room. But that wasn't the full picture, because the ending of pain does not only remove suffering, it reveals what suffering was hiding from you. It shows you how much of your energy had been tied to surviving instead of receiving. It shows you how long you had been living with one eye on the wound and one eye on the future, waiting for the future to finally feel safe. Now the future is beginning to feel possible, not because everything has changed outside you yet, because something has changed inside the place where the pain used to speak the loudest. And that shift is everything. That shift is why this feels like more than relief. It feels like a verdict being overturned, a sentence being completed, a burden being lifted in a way your mind can barely keep up with. Chosen one. This is the part where your soul starts recognizing the silence differently. Before, silence may have felt like abandonment. Now it is beginning to feel like space, space that was cleared for you, space that pain could not occupy forever, space that had to remain open until your heart was ready to trust what comes after the hurt. You may still feel the echo. That is normal. Some endings leave sound behind them. Some endings leave the body catching up to what the spirit already knows. But do not confuse the echo for the return. Do not call it back just because it passed through one more time. The last sound of pain is often the most convincing one because it wants you to believe it still belongs. It does not. It has already started losing access. That is why your mind feels different at odd moments. That is why a memory may rise, but it does not land the same way it used to. That is why the same trigger no longer creates the same collapse. Something in you has changed its position. And once that position changes, the old pain cannot speak from the same place anymore. That is a hidden mercy. Not every release feels soft. Some releases feel like internal resistance finally breaking under the weight of truth. Some feel like tears with no clear reason. Some feel like a tired heart refusing to carry what it once carried without question. And then, slowly, the body begins to agree with the spirit. It begins to loosen, to unclench, to stop expecting what has already begun to leave. This is why the timing matters so much. Because if it had ended too early, you might not have understood the lesson hidden inside it. If it had lingered too long, you might have mistaken survival for identity, but now it is ending at the exact point where your soul can finally see the pattern. You were never being broken for nothing. You were being prepared to recognize peace when it arrived. And peace does not always feel like peace at first. Sometimes it feels like uncertainty without the usual pain attached. Sometimes it feels like standing in a room after a storm and realizing the damage is not as strong as it looked, while the wind was still screaming. Sometimes it feels like breathing again and noticing how strange it is to breathe without fear. That is where you are. Not at the storm, not in the collapse. In the first quiet after the collapse. And the quiet is speaking. It is saying that the thing you thought would never end is now beginning to dissolve. It is saying that the part of your story that once felt permanent was only passing through. It is saying that your pain was never the final authority over you, even when it felt ancient, even when it felt written into your bones, even when it made you question whether relief was ever meant for you. Chosen one, relief was always meant for you. That is why this release feels so deeply personal. That is why it reaches into places words could not reach before. It is not just easing a wound. It is restoring your right to feel safe inside your own life again. And that right has been waiting patiently beneath all the noise, beneath all the fear, beneath every moment you wondered why the pain had to stay so long. Now you can begin to see it differently. The pain was not there because you were forgotten. It was there because something in your path had to be cleared with precision, not roughly, not carelessly, precisely. Because what is meant for you cannot enter through a heart still chained to what hurt it. So the chain had to loosen, then break, then disappear enough that you could finally stand without feeling dragged backward. And this is where the story deepens. Because the moment pain loses its place, your discernment sharpens. You begin noticing what your spirit tolerated out of survival. You begin feeling which connections, thoughts, and habits were built around managing damage instead of living in truth. You begin realizing that the pain was not only hurting you, it was training you to accept less than what your soul always knew was possible. That is why its ending is such a holy interruption. It stops the old pattern before it can claim another season. It interrupts the cycle at the exact point where you are finally ready to see it, and once you see it, you cannot fully return to it. You may revisit the memory, you may feel the tenderness of what was lost, but you will not hear it the same way again. The spell is weakening, the grip is loosening, the old language is failing, and that failure is not random. It is evidence that the thing you feared had more power than it truly did. Evidence that your endurance was stronger than the sorrow. Evidence that your spirit was carrying more victory than you were able to notice while you were still inside the ache. So now as this continues, pay attention to what feels unfamiliar. The unfamiliar calm, the unfamiliar breath, the unfamiliar thought that maybe this really is ending. Those moments matter. They are not small. They are the first signs that your nervous system is no longer preparing for the same blow. And that is what changing pain looks like before it fully leaves. It does not always announce itself with celebration. Sometimes it simply stops feeling inevitable. Sometimes the heaviness forgets how to arrive with the same confidence. Sometimes the thing that used to take over your whole day can only touch the edges now. That is not weakness. That is retreat. And chosen one, retreat is what happens when something realizes it can no longer hold the line against your becoming. It steps back because your becoming has become stronger than your old suffering. It steps back because the version of you that survived the worst part is no longer the version of you that is standing here now. You are different now. Not loud different, not obvious different, night obvious different, deep different. The kind of different that changes what can stay attached to you. That is why this pain had to end this way. Not all at once, not with fireworks, with a sacred unraveling. A release so gradual that only a watching spirit would notice it in time. And you have been noticing, even if you did not know what to call it, even if you only felt it as a strange little hope rising where there used to be dread. That hope is not foolish. It is evidence too. Evidence that your heart is beginning to trust the ending. Evidence that your soul already saw what your mind is still catching up to. Evidence that the pain has been losing its future for longer than you realized. So stay with that. Stay with the soft certainty building under the noise. Stay with the sense that something has already shifted beyond the point of no return. Because this is the part where the old burden gets quiet enough to hear itself leaving. And once it hears that, it cannot pretend forever. It was never meant to stay. That is the truth moving through everything now. It was never meant to stay, not in your body, not in your mind, not in the sacred space your life has been preparing to enter. And even though the full relief may still be unfolding, the ending has already begun its work. It is working in the places you cannot measure, in the pauses, in the dreams, in the moments where you almost expect the pain to hit, and it does not hit as hard. In the small mercies that feel too quiet to celebrate, but too real to ignore. That is how destiny sometimes closes a wound, not by erasing what happened, by refusing to let what happened keep writing the next page. So breathe here, stay here, feel the difference. Because the difference is the message. And the message is simple, even if the road to it was not. The pain that tried to make itself permanent is no longer allowed to remain. Its time is ending. Its voice is fading. And the life that comes after this is already pressing against the edge of your story, waiting for the space you have finally been given. Do you feel it now? That pressure at the edge is not a threat, it is a presence. A future that has been held back long enough to arrive without competing with what broke you. That is why the shift feels so strange. Because it is not only the pain ending, it is the next part of your life becoming real enough to touch. You may still be standing inside the echo of what was heavy, but even there something has changed. The old pain no longer fills the whole field. It only passes through it. And when pain becomes something that passes through instead of something that owns you, the whole world begins to feel different. Not instantly, but unmistakably. Chosen one, this is the part where your spirit starts noticing the door before your mind does. Your mind wants proof. Your spirit already senses the opening. That is why you have been feeling stretched between two realities. One where the pain still tries to speak, and one where it no longer has the right to stay that loud. But that was never the full picture. Because the moment the pain begins to lose its authority, your life does not just get lighter. It gets clearer. And clarity can feel almost uncomfortable after a long season of confusion, because confusion became familiar. You learned how to survive inside uncertainty. You learned how to move while holding ache in one hand and hope in the other. Now the ache is dropping lower, and the hope is beginning to stand upright. That is a sacred transition. The kind you cannot force. The kind you can only witness as it unfolds around you. And if you have been wondering why everything felt delayed, why the answers stayed hidden, why the release came so slowly, this is part of it. The ending had to be precise enough that you would not mistake relief for fantasy when it finally came. It had to arrive in a way your soul could recognize, not as luck, not as accident, as timing. There is something almost unbearable about finally seeing that the pain was not eternal. Because when it was present, it tried to take up all the room in your awareness. It made itself feel normal, necessary, impossible to live without. But now the spell is weakening, and what you are left with is truth. The pain was loud, not permanent. It was heavy, not rightful. It was long, not endless. And that changes everything. Because once you understand that something can feel forever without actually being forever, you stop handing your future over to what only appeared solid. You start seeing the shape of your own freedom. You start sensing where your life has been waiting for your agreement. You start realizing that the silence after the hurt is not emptiness. It is the room where restoration begins to breathe. I need you to stay with that. Because the next part is not about forgetting what happened. It is about no longer letting what happened govern the meaning of what comes next. That is the deeper release. Not amnesia. Authority. Your authority returning from the place where pain borrowed it. And when that happens, even your memories begin to change. They stop feeling like open wounds every time they rise. They start feeling like evidence of a chapter that could not survive your becoming. That is what healing looks like when it is finally honest. Not pretending it never happened. Just refusing to let it keep speaking over the person you have become. Chosen one, there is a reason this feels so intimate. Because the ending of pain is never just about what left. It is about what returns to you when it leaves. Your ease, your steadiness, your breath, your right to exist without bracing for impact every second. Those things were always yours. They were only buried beneath the noise long enough for you to almost forget their texture. Almost, but not completely. And that matters, because some part of you never stopped listening for the shift. Some part of you never fully agreed that the hurt had the final word. That part of you is what brought you here. That part of you is why this ending feels familiar before it feels visible. Your soul has seen this approaching for longer than your mind has admitted. There is a quiet power in being the one who stays awake through the last stretch. Not because it is easy, because it is revealing. You begin to notice how the pain behaves when it knows it is losing. It gets repetitive, it gets desperate, it tries to echo itself louder. But repetition is not strength. It is the sound of something trying not to disappear. And you're hearing that now, even if only faintly. That is why I am telling you not to rush past this moment. The slow fade matters. The gradual loosening matters. The gradual loosening matters. The way your chest opens 1 degree at a time matters. The way your thoughts stop circling the same wound with the same urgency matters. That is the universe making sure you feel the departure, not just the aftermath. Because the departure itself carries a message. It says the pain never owned the room, it only occupied it. It says the space was always meant to be cleared. It says what you thought was a life sentence was actually a season with a hidden exit. And now that exit is no longer hidden the way it was before. Now it is becoming part of your awareness, one breath at a time. But the strange thing is this. The moment you recognize the exit, you also recognize the fear of crossing it. Not because you want the pain back, because anything beyond long pain can feel unfamiliar enough to make the body hesitate. So if you find yourself pausing at the edge of relief, that does not mean you are failing. It means your spirit is adjusting to a world where the wound no longer runs the schedule. That adjustment is not small. It is a full internal rearrangement, and it is happening in you now, quietly, deeply, without needing to be announced. You may still be carrying the memory of how hard it was. That memory is not the enemy. It is proof. Proof that you endured the kind of heaviness that would have changed someone else into something smaller. But not you. Not completely. Something in you kept its shape. Something in you preserved the line between pain and identity. And now that line is becoming visible again. That is the thing to watch. Not the pain itself. The line. The point where it stops being part of your living and starts becoming part of your history. That line is moving. It is not fixed anymore. It is sliding forward into a place where the old suffering can no longer claim the center of your days. And when the center shifts, everything else begins to follow. Your attention, your energy, your sense of what is possible. Even your willingness to hope starts to change shape. Not dramatically, but enough. Enough to matter. Enough to turn the page without asking permission from the past. Chosen one. This is where the prophecy begins to feel personal. Because the pain leaving was never just about relief. It was about return. Your return to yourself. Your return to the part of you that does not need to be guarded every second. Your return to a life that does not begin with dread. That return has already started. You can feel it in the way certain fears are no longer as convincing as they used to be. And yes, the old ache may still try one last time to make itself seem important. That is what fading things do. They ask for one more moment, one more look, one more surrender. But your spirit is learning to answer differently now, not with panic, with distance, with recognition, with the calm certainty that some things are only loud because they know their time is ending. That is where you are. Inside the ending, inside the quiet unraveling, inside the sacred unmaking of a pain that stayed longer than it was ever meant to. And because you are inside it, you may not see the whole shape yet. That is fine. You do not need the whole shape to know the direction. You only need to know that the pressure is not pushing you down anymore. It is pushing the old chapter out. That is why this feels so intense. Not because danger is growing, because release is. And release has its own kind of gravity. It pulls the buried things upward. It exposes what was hidden under survival. It reveals how much you had normalized carrying what was never yours to keep forever. Now that realization is starting to land, and it may land softly at first. A thought, a pause, a sudden stillness where anxiety used to answer first. Hold that stillness. It matters more than it looks. It is how the new chapter announces itself before it has words. Because the pain is ending, yes, but even more than that, the pain is losing its right to define what your life means, and that is the real turning point. Not just the absence of suffering, the return of meaning, the return of direction, the return of a future that no longer has to ask the wound for permission to exist. And the deeper you feel that, the more the old weight loosens. Not all at once, just enough to let you stand in the truth of it. Just enough to let you know this was never imagination. Just enough to let you sense that something far bigger than comfort is happening here. A sacred correction, a divine ending, a line being drawn in the sand of your story that says this far and no further. Stay there with that, because the next movement is already gathering, and it is not coming to remind you of pain. It is coming to show you what pain could not take from you after all. It is coming to show you that the part of you which kept going was never small. It was never weak. It was always carrying the beginning of this release. So stay open, stay still, because what arrives next will not feel like a repeat. It will feel like the first real breath after a long season of holding on. The truth is, that chapter of pain is already ending for you. Subscribe and don't lose this moment. Chosen one, your path is shifting now.